Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Mike Newbeck, and I'm the superintendent. I want to thank you for being here. We weren't sure how many people were going to show up, and so I know it was scheduled originally for the NPR. We told us about 50, but again, we didn't want to have to move at that point and try to set all this stuff up, so we just thought we would play it safe. And being here, plus it's a great space. It's easier to hear and hear, bigger screen to see instead of on smaller TVs. So thanks again for being here. And I will respect your time, so we'll get started. So the agenda tonight is I'm going to talk about how school districts are funded. What is an operating levy? What does that mean? Because that would be new to Byron. Why does Byron need an operating levy? And then also, what are some changes that we made moving forward already? The FAQs, some of it is what if it doesn't pass? What if it does pass? What have we done to reduce already? What does enrollment have to do with everything? And then what does open enrollment have to do as well? And so just so you know, we will be putting this up on our website, but if you want to take notes, you can, but we will be having this up on the website, as well as we are videotaping it tonight, and the video will be on tomorrow or the next day on our website. So you will be able to rewatch it if you missed something. So I first wanted to start, because funding in public schools can be very difficult, and there's a lot to it. So this was a video that was put out by the Minnesota Association of School Business Officials that I would like us to just take a couple minutes to watch.
We have great schools here in Minnesota, serving our youngest learners in early childhood family education and preschool programs to our K-12 programs and beyond with adult education. Districts have people working hard to maintain and build programs that help learners of all ages. This, of course, requires money to operate. But how exactly are schools funded in Minnesota? Unfortunately, it's a bit more complex than some of the principles taught in an Intro to Business course. Funding public education is a complicated business. There are many stakeholders at the table: students, parents, school leaders, community members, business leaders, and elected officials, to name a few. The money to pay for elementary and secondary education in Minnesota comes through a combination of state-collected taxes, primarily income and sales tax, along with locally collected property taxes. The majority of revenue for school districts, up to 70%, comes from the state. The largest share of the funds provided to schools comes in the form of general education aid, which is intended to provide the basic financial support for the education program. This goes to fund things like transportation, teachers, and curriculum materials. School districts also receive funding for specific categories through formulas generally used to meet costs that vary significantly between districts. These funds must be used for specific areas, like special education or long-term facility maintenance. Some of these funds are tied to specific items, like literacy programs to get students reading by 3rd grade or school breakfast and lunch programs. The remaining school district revenue comes from local tuition and fees, federal grants, and local property taxes. There are many variables which impact our budget each year: enrollment, community support, the local economy, and decisions by state lawmakers. The challenge is to take each of these revenues, which typically don't keep pace with inflation, and meet the needs of all of our stakeholders. For our budget, we take the revenue we expect to receive and allot the funds in buckets. The largest bucket is for paying our teachers and staff. Other buckets include special education, transportation, operations and maintenance, and administration. The state also mandates some of our spending for things like special education and basic skills. Other factors influence how we spend money: class size ratios, aging buildings, emerging technology, and needs specific to the students in our district. We always need to prepare for the winds of change, which can quickly impact our local budget. New legislation, competitive enrollment, teacher retirements, and health insurance costs are all things that can quickly make a big impact. Each year, our challenge is how do we connect all of these revenue and expenditure drivers in order to build an effective budget while taking into account stakeholder voices. It's important for us to collectively develop financial priorities to ensure we use our resources wisely and have the greatest impact on our learners.
Okay, thank you. And just before I continue, I did want to I did want to say that we will have time for questions at the end. We also have some people here that if you want to ask individual questions too, there's myself. We have Mr. Abe Rodemeyer, who's our intermediate school or intermediate and primary school principal. And then we also have next to him is Julie Sink, who's our interim finance director at this time. And then we have David Wernemont. He's a school board member, and Lisa Jessen, who's also a school board member, here to answer any questions afterwards if you would like.
We have great schools here in Minnesota, serving our youngest learners.
So one thing that I wanted to point out, because it did talk about the funding from our state and how important that is, something that I will talk about throughout this is how we are having, we have issues as trying to keep up with inflation. And I just want to show you this, that over the last 20 years, this is the blue line is would be the per pupil funding, and the funding we would get from the state if they would have kept up with inflation for schools over the last 20 years. And you can see how that gap is getting wider. The dotted line is what we presently get for per pupil funding. So that top line would be $8,637 per student if it was kept up with inflation, but presently we get $7,281 per student. And the difference there, you can see for last year, would have been $3.4 million difference if the state would have kept up with inflation over the last 20 years. So that is one thing that is really affecting schools as we move forward in trying to keep up with the inflationary costs. Also, I want you to know that we are the third lowest funded school district per pupil in the state. And there's lots of different reasons for that. But one is because we don't have an operating levy. Two is we don't have some of those cross-categorical fundings in some areas of, we don't have a high population of special education. We don't have a high population of free and reduced lunch. And those, as you know, or maybe don't know, in some of those inner city type schools, they get a lot more funding than we do. Even places like Rochester will get a lot more money than we will because of those types of categories or students in those categories. Byron revenue per pupil is about $4,000 less than the state average. We receive $10,465 and the state average is $14,479. That's per student. So that's $14,000 less per student. But in spite of being the third lowest funded, and this is not just something that's been in the last year, it is something that we have been dealing with for quite a few years, but we are still a high performing district. You can see here, these are percentile scores. So you can see, for example, in high school, reading, we are the 99th percentile. That means that our scores and our kids outperformed better than 99% of the other high schools in Minnesota that took the test. And you can see that we do very well in reading, math, and science when you look at state compared to the other state districts. In spite of also being the third lowest district, we offer many variety of extracurricular activities and co-curricular experiences. We have many clubs. We have anything from football to trap shooting to fishing, to egg club, agriculture. We try to, as part of our goals of the profile of a graduate, is to make sure that kids have some niche, and if they are interested and have a passion for that, that we try to do as much as we can to instill that passion. Also, because of that, I talked a little bit about, just mentioned the profile of a graduate, but we have some real meaningful courses. We have the STEM courses. We still are one of the few schools that have welding, that have something to do with automobiles, as well as agriculture, as well as having mentorship classes, having post-secondary planning classes. Those are all part of our profile of a graduate at the high school level, but this profile of graduate also starts in preschool, and our community, our school community, and our students are working PK through 12 to make this come true. And so we have a lot of experimental learning and a lot of projects that they can do, a lot of projects with the community, and we expect that they take some of these projects and make our community better. But all of that takes time and staffing to make happen. I also just want to take a couple minutes to show this video as well. This we got from the Schools for Equity and Education. They work with our legislators to try to work on funding equity, because as I mentioned earlier, funding is not the same from one district to the next.
One pizza, please, with the works.
Sure thing. Hey, you look like you're from Businessville, is that right?
Yes, I'm from Businessville.
All right. That'll be $10. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's great. I'll have a pizza with the works too.
You live in hometown, don't you?
Yes, ma'am. Proud to be from hometown Minnesota.
A pizza with the works will cost you $30.
But I only have $10.
Oh. Well, for hometown folks, this is what you get for $10.
But that's not fair. He paid the same and he got a much better pizza.
Well, that's our special formula here at Capital Pizza. You wouldn't accept this if a restaurant treated you this way. Yet this unfairness is real for a lot of school children and taxpayers across Minnesota. Here's how it works. When the residents in Businessville pass a levy referendum for their schools, the corporations, shopping malls, and office complexes help pay that bill. Neighboring Hometown has very little business development. When residents in Hometown pass a school levy for an identical amount of money, they pay 2 or 3 times as much. You heard right. That's double or even triple the dollars for the same amount of school levy money. Homeowners in Businessville get a tax discount that is sanctioned and approved by state lawmakers. Under this same unfair system, if levy taxes are equal in the 2 towns, Businessville schools get 2 or 3 times more levy revenue than hometown schools. This allows Businessville schools to offer their students more opportunities and a higher quality education than students in neighboring Hometown, who have larger class sizes, fewer music and arts programs, outdated technology, no extra help for kids who need it, and fewer advanced courses. It's time to end this unfair system of taxation and support equity in education.
Tell your legislators to equalize education funding to make Minnesota's system of funding public schools fair. For more information, go to schoolsforequity.org. All public school students, like me, must have equal access to a high-quality education, regardless of where they live in Minnesota.
So and that's kind of the area that Byron is in as the hometown schools. This graphic here is also by C, and it shows that if the maximum to go out for an operating levy is $2,929. If we did that, and all these other districts did this, you can see that we would be, for that same amount of money, we would be paying $1,692 for if you owned a $300,000 home. And if you owned a $300,000 home, for example, in Eden Prairie, you would pay $338. And so so we do recognize that the residents of Byron, especially with the referendums we've had in the past, do take on a lot of burden for us when we look at these operating levies and any other levies or referendums that we have asked for in the past. So what is an operating levy? An operating levy is the primary way schools can increase revenue. We do not have be able to go out and, as a McDonald's, go out and charge 50 cents more for a hamburger in order to make up the money. So November election ballot question stated as a per pupil. So for an operating levy, it's not like for building, we went out for $44 million. This one is stated by per pupil. That's state statute. If we were to pass in November, then it would be payable for this next year, 2025, and we would be able to receive the funds for the 25-26 school year. It allows districts to generate additional general education revenue, and it can be used for anything, for capital, for operation expenses, for example, salaries, technologies, utilities, transportation. And it's an annual levy with a maximum of 10 years. So what the levy is set for is to go out for 10 years, and that's the most that it can be set for. Taxes spread on the referendum market value, so most properties will pay the same tax dollars depending on your property value. And residents in this type of levy will be paying for 68% of the levy. Elections may only be held for this in November. If we were going out for another bond to build another school, then you could go out also in April. You could go out sometime in the summer, and then again in November. Here, you can only do an operating levy or operating referendum during November. So if we don't pass it now, we would have to wait till next November, and then the money wouldn't come to us until the following school year. So then we're 2 years out. And bonds are for building, and levies are for learning. So that's the difference. Out of 331 school districts in Minnesota, 73% have an operating levy right now. Average is for that operating levy is $1,080 per pupil. I hope you can see this, but maybe on the bottom we have these schools do not have an operating levy right now. Goodhue, Byron, Cass and Manorville, Pine Island, we don't have an operating levy right now. Stewartville has about $243 from their operating per pupil. Hayfield has $594 per pupil. Cannon Falls has $500 per pupil, and then they have another $422 that are used for capital, like technology. And I know that they are also going out this year to increase up to another $750 per pupil. The Rochester is at $942 per pupil, and Zumbrota-Mazeppa is at $1,238 per pupil. So those are some of the area school districts around us. I do know that there is also conversations in some of the other districts about when they might be going out for an operating, because they are in the same situation that we are finding ourselves in. This year, 54 school districts are asking voters to approve referendum funding this fall. That's not just operating, but that is also could be for a tech levy or a capital levy. It could also be for building bonds. But there are going to be 54 school districts going out for referendums. So what is our ask? On November 5th, voters in Byron are asked to support an operating referendum to increase revenue by $800 per pupil with inflation adjustments for each of the next 10 years to support the day-to-day operations of the district. This proposed levy will generate an additional $1.9 million to support district operations, and it's ensuring that we continue to provide a high-quality educational experience for all students. This is really small, but this is the question that you will actually see on the ballot on November 5th. It just explains what I had talked about. It will also say on there that by voting yes on this ballot question, you are voting for a property tax increase. This is kind of the breakdown of where you are, depending on what your house value is or your property value would be, how much you would pay per month, and then how much you would pay annually for taxes for this referendum. So why the need for more funding? As we look back, There's been some of the challenges that we have experienced: an increase in health insurance, elimination of COVID funding, regionally competitive salaries and benefits, trying to be regionally competitive as we go through negotiations, increased costs in purchase services, and also inflation costs that have outpaced the revenue that we received. For the 23-24 school year, we received a 4% increase in the student formula, and that is the most that we have received in quite a while. And the money, the state, if you watched the news last year, talked about how much money that they gave, billions of dollars to the schools. We received a 4% increase on the student formula, but the 4% increase is not on our total budget. It is just on the basic revenue, that student formula that I showed you earlier of 7281. That's what it's for. It's not for our total budget. So we only get about 60%, which is about 60% of our total revenue. Some of the money we received also from the state, which we appreciate, but they are earmarked for certain things. For example, $40,000 goes to media. $40,000 had to be for student support. And some of these were to add positions. And sometimes $40,000 wouldn't pay for a full-time counselor for student support, for example. The money that we received had to go towards literacy or English language learning or special education. And then this year, we received, again, a 2% increase for this school year. Again, that is on the student formula, per pupil formula, not on our total budget. So looking ahead, why do we need this funding? Projections show that enrollment will remain flat or decrease over the next 10 years. Housing is the variable here. We had, back in 2019, we had a demographic study done, and it showed that we were going to need to build and add, because we were adding 42 students, 89 students, 65 students, and that's what the demographics was showing, that we were a growing community. That happened over several years. And the projections were that we were going to be overcrowded at the high school, we were going to be overcrowded in some of the elementaries, and we were going to be overcrowded in 26, 27 at the middle school and intermediate school. And so that's when the district at that time decided to go out for the $44 million referendum, because we added 9 classrooms to this high school. We've added also, we redid the community ed center and housed our early childhood special education there, which opened up space at our primary school for the growth. And then we've also, because in 2006, still left our auditorium and our athletic fields and everything over there. We wanted the best for our students in our community, so we asked to have money for this facility, for our stadium in the back, and other fields that are on site, knowing and thinking that we were going to be moving forward with large projections. And if you think about it, each of these students is about $10,000 roughly, maybe even a little bit more. But it's, 89 students times $10,000 was a pretty good also increase to our revenue at that time, besides what we were receiving as 1 or 2% from the state. Enrollment changes, though, not only being flat or decreasing, and you're saying, wow, but Byron's growing. That is the asterisk on this last slide. The asterisk is that housing is the variable. And we meet with the city. They're part of our finance and facilities committee, the mayor and a councilman, as well as the city manager and city administrator. And when I first started, this is my 4th year, they were giving out about 90 building permits a year. The last year, I think they were at 23 to 25 in there. There just isn't as many building permits that are happening. Well, I know there is pockets of building happening around, and we don't know what's going to be happening south of the high school. That's still a question mark. So the housing is the variable here, but if the demographics, if that stays constant as is projected, then our demographics and our enrollment will stay flat or decrease in years to come. The other thing that we need to be concerned about is this year we have 176 seniors, and we have only 150 in our kindergarten classes. In the past, we've had as many as 180 or more. The last 2 years, we've had 160. This year, we have 150 in kindergarten, and so we'll be graduating 176 and only bringing in, if this holds true, only bringing in about 150. So already that's 26 kids that we would be short, that we would have to make up the difference for. And at around $10,000 a student, that's $260,000 of revenue that we would be losing each year if that was the case. School districts may have new mandates also that we are going to have to deal with, all of which cost additional money, which includes additional course requirements and in order to be able to graduate. In January of 2026 is also our paid family medical leave. That will be happening. We're going to have to pay part of a tax, and the employee is going to have to pay part of a tax into a fund through the state it's kind of used as unemployment as well. It's like unemployment where people are able to take extended medical leaves and be paid partially of their salary. Also, unemployment for hourly staff have started 2 summers ago, and this year we're expecting that bill to be a little over $200,000. At this time, we were told that it will be last year and this year and possibly next year to be paid for by the state. However, we'll see. There was also just a pot of money, and once that pot of money ran out from the state, then hadn't been no plans. I know next spring is also a funding year for our legislation. So again, we don't know of any plans beyond next year, so maybe they'll come through and be able to still help us fund that. If not, we're going to have to be ready to fund a $200,000 bill for unemployment for hourly staff, like bus drivers, paraprofessionals, clerical staff, and so forth that have the summers off. They can collect unemployment now for that. Plus also mandated teacher training. So with those additional courses, we have to also have teacher training for our teachers. And we don't get extra money for that in many cases. These are required laws that we must spend money on, but lawmakers may not a lot of times allocate dollars, or they might do it to start, and then after a couple of years, that funding goes away because they'll find something else to start. But yet then the school districts are on the hook to continue to pay those salaries and costs. The district previously used these funds to help maintain our 8% fund balance. We used some of our fund balance, our savings account. We used ESSER funding. That's the COVID funding, which is about $414,000. Those two are no longer an option at this point. And then we also used, like I said before, the increase in enrollment over the last several years. And, with 89 students or 60 students or even 25 students, that's an extra, 25 students is extra $250,000 that we could use towards that. We would use that to help fund some of the things that we needed to fund. So we've heard a lot of questions, so I wanted to address some of those tonight. Why is it taking so long to figure out the 23-24 finances? So we are doing reconciliations and revenues, and they're typically completed in July and towards the end of the school year, into the summer, and so forth. But with the transition of 2 business managers in the last year, we are making sure the accuracy in our financial and operational data as we move forward. So our interim finance director is working diligently with our business office to be able to make sure that the numbers that are out there are validated, and that we know exactly what we have or what we don't have moving into this school year. So what happens if the operating levy doesn't pass? In general, it will increase class sizes at all levels. It will reduce support services for students. And when you talk about support services, that could be as paraprofessionals. It's already affected this year when we made some cuts as to some of our intervention opportunities for kids. It could also be mental health supports for students. And we would also need to eliminate course offerings. Some of those offerings that make Byron special that I talked about earlier, the mentoring programs, the different classes that really go towards kids' passions and so forth. For example, running the food trucks, those sort of things, we may not be able to continue. And then also reduce or eliminate some extracurricular programs or activities or clubs. But what happens if we do pass? We will be able to maintain the profile of a graduate, those classes and experiences which are so great for our kids and our families. We'll be able to attract and retain great staff and keep the great staff that are here. I wish you could have been here last week during the Homecoming Pep Fest and saw all the teachers that were singing, that were dancing, that were just building great relationships with kids and all the things that they do from PK through 12th grade to really help our kids succeed. We have an awesome staff and an awesome district. We want to keep our classes at or below present levels. We want to be able to meet the challenge of the flat and decreasing enrollment, because if we do have that, we are going to want to be able to have the backups and reserves to be able to handle any challenges. We also want to maintain the many mental health and academic supports that we have for students, and not only maintain but maybe increase those, because as many of us know, those are two areas that really help our students every day. We want to build our finances to meet the school board policies at 8% fund balance. We want to go that and beyond. Again, that is to help us build some cash reserves so that we don't have to do any short-term borrowing to meet payroll and so forth. So we want to make sure that, again, these are things that we would be able to do if the operating levy passes, so we can meet those challenges in the future. So what have we previously done to reduce expenses? This last summer, we did reduce staff, including administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, buildings and grounds, support staff, school nurse, and school resource officer. We did a reduction in our department budgets, our athletic department budgets, transportation and technology, and reduction in buildings and grounds budgets. In addition, we increased some student fees to try to generate additional revenue. All in all, it comes to about $1.5 million in reductions coming into this year. So what has changed to ensure that the money is being well managed? We've increased the people that are associated with First Security bank accounts. In the past, it was just our business manager that had access or would get notifications. Right now, we've added about 5 people to that list, including school board members, administrators, business office people, and there's more people working and having eyes on those accounts. We've improved communication with First Security Bank regarding our line of credit and how that will work in the future, so that we make sure that if we do have to use that line of credit, which we haven't since we set up these plans, that we have an idea of what we need to do or how it will be communicated. We'll be doing monthly reconciliations done by Region 5. This is a company that we work with for much of our finance, and so each month we'll be sending them our revenue and our expenditures, and they will be helping us do the monthly reconciliations, so we have another set of eyes on the money coming and going inside of in our district. We did spending protocols, were revised and written, and they've been given to all staff, so that we are making sure that we are staying within our budgets. Also improved accounting practices in the area of student activity accounts and fundraising, and then also monthly detailed reports, different ones, new ones, and more detailed will be given to the board and the community monthly. We are also forming a budget committee that will meet at least quarterly, if not more, in regards to overseeing all of our budgets, our adopted budgets, the revised budgets, our debt service, and everything that comes within a budget. And it will include administrators and finance people, school board members, and teachers at least. And then we are doing everything we can through our website and everything to improve budget transparency moving forward. Did the 2021 bond and facility project cause this challenge? No. A bond is different than an operating levy. We can't go back and take even any money that's left over from the bond and use it towards our operating cost. That's against state statutes. So the money that is passed in a bond can only be used for building additions and improvements. However, some of the improvements by the bond are saving the district money because we're being more efficient and also taking care of some of those projects that probably our long-term facility maintenance account would have taken. So that's helped in that area as well. So why do we have open enrolled students? Open enrolled students are important to our schools and our budget. Right now, 22% of our K-12 student population is open enrolled. Approximately, though, 4.4% of our resident students are served elsewhere. So we have approximately almost 5% of our students who don't go to Byron schools and they're serviced elsewhere. So having these open enrolled students fill that, because we don't receive money for those students who do not come here. So that's lost revenue, and as well as the funding that they bring in. Open enrollment generates nearly 18.5% of our district's total revenue, and that is roughly around $5 million a year is from our open enrolled students. Open enrollment revenue helps us offer a variety of experiences and supports. Excuse me, I gotta fly up here, huh? And supports for all K-12 students. It actually does help to retain lower class size. It helps with our co-curricular activities to make sure we have enough levels for everybody. It helps with our student academic supports. It helps with our health and wellness supports. And it helps with us being able to afford all those great opportunities through the profile of a graduate. Open enrollment, here's some of the myths that I hear. Open enrollment causes larger class sizes. Actually, because of open enrollment, we're able to hire and retain teachers, which helps us have smaller class sizes and leveled classes so that we can have higher level classes for those students who need the extra push, and we also have intervention type classes for those kids who need the extra help. Our district pays to transport them. No, we do not transport them. They have to find their own transportation. However, we do have a couple buses that are close to the border area, and if we have room on those buses, students in open enrollment can ride the buses, but they have to pay a fee each year to do so. And they only get on if there's room. We have about 120 open enrolled students who would like to be on buses that are on a waiting list. But we don't have room for them because we transport our residents first. Open enrolled families don't have to pay taxes for education in Byron. That's true, but they do. But it is for the school district where they live, and we would have smaller schools or one less school if we didn't have open enrollment. That is not true. We would not be able to close a school because those students are spread out K-12, and there isn't enough room to still go down to like one elementary school or something. We wouldn't have enough room for those kids, and we would have many fewer teachers, as well as student supports and mental health and interventions and so forth and programming. So it would not be, it is not beneficial actually for us not to have open enrollment. And many school districts will go out and market for open enrollment because of the benefits that they receive and we receive from students and families who are open enrolled. And then I hear, well, if people want to send their children to Byron, they should move here. Many people try. or they do move here. There have been people who've been open road for a couple years, and as soon as a house is available to them that's maybe in their price range or something that would suit their family, they do try and move here as much as possible. So here's what we know, that inflation has affected everyone, including you. Byron residents are taxed heavily because of the past referendums for buildings, and we thank you for that. And you support our schools greatly and have for many years. And Byron is known for their schools. We know that. And that is why people often move here, is because if they're moving, for example, I've been told many times, they got a job at Mayo, they're coming in from out of state, they look at where are the best schools around, and the first place they come to is Byron. And they start looking for houses here. And so that's what we want to continue to happen, because if that happens, your property values will stay up. And when it's time for you to sell your house, hopefully it will go quicker than normal, and hopefully you get a better price than what others would in surrounding communities. This referendum, though, will really help us ensure quality programming for our students, which is our most important customer. It will attract and retain quality teachers, and we have so many of them. And not just teachers, but also staff, even in the office, in the libraries, in the cafeterias. It just helps us to keep so many great people. It will increase our fund balance and cash reserves moving forward. It will help us meet those financial challenges that we are expecting in the next several years. And it will keep Byron schools, and this is on our you'll see this on our school board agenda every month. And we want our Byron schools a community of learners committed to making the world a better place. And if you saw any information from this past weekend at our homecoming game, they raised $10,000 for 4 people who are going through cancer, and you know, that was important for our teams and our community to do that, and for our kids to show that they give back to our community and to make our world a better place. And they start here, and then when they leave Byron, they make it a better place somewhere in the world. So at this time, if you have specific questions, I know I went through a lot. We will be having another meeting, relatively similar. We might have other information as we go, but we'll send information and put things on our website as they become available. We'll send those out. We have our district newsletter that goes out on Sundays called the Byron Buzz. We'll put information in there. But again, we'll have our next meeting on October 14th, which is 2 weeks from last night. So, but at this time, I'll do my best to answer questions. If I don't have the answer, I'll write them down and get that information out to you. So, but I know I went through this quickly. Do you have any questions for me at this time? Oh, well, hold on, we have David Wernemont has a microphone, so he'll bring it to you.
Open enrolled students, are we going to be paying for kids who aren't our students?
Yes, so by state statute, it's per student. So that 22% of those kids, yes, those are also in that count as well. Well, if they live in a community where they have to support their school district, like they live in Rochester, for example, and they pass that referendum, their taxes will go up, but it'll go up according to Rochester's and not to us. Ours do not go to them. They do not pay any of our taxes. They do not do any voting, so they can't come and vote for a yes or no for this referendum. But yeah, they do not pay for any taxes here in Byron. But again, like I say, they do bring in 22% or over $5 million in our budget.
You said this is by student, so as the student population goes up and down, that'll change yearly?
Yes.
And that'll be based on each school year then?
What happens is October 1st is the number that the state uses. So whatever number is our number on October 1st, that's what they base the revenue on. So if we have less students next year, then the overall could be less. But if we have more students, that could be more. So, but I just want to say, as we have more students and more people move into the community, then we have more people paying the taxes and be able to do that. And if we get, we are business poor. As we get more businesses that come into the area, they then will pay their share of the referendums as well.
So I understand that you can't use any of the construction money for operating.
Yes.
But I have a two-part question with that. Was all the money of the $44 million, were all those projects completed, and was all that money spent?
Okay. They are completed, but we are doing the punch list for each one of those. So it's just like going into a new house. They build you a house, and then you have to go through and say, okay, this has to be redone, or this didn't quite fit, this door doesn't quite fit, and so forth. But for the most part, our projects are done, and we are still going through the final numbers with that. But the preliminary numbers that we have about $300,000 left.
Okay.
Okay.
I believe your state legislature changed the rules on the referendums. I believe it's going to expire in 10 years, but it doesn't have to be voter approved to be extended another 10 years. It can be approved just by the school board. So potentially this thing could go on for 20 years.
It could, but only if nothing else changes. Like, we couldn't go and say, now we want $1,200 per student. If it stayed at $800 per student and nothing else changes, that was something the legislature did vote on last year, was that you could renew the same operating, the school district, school board could renew that same operating levy for another 10 years, but it has to be exactly the same. No other additional funding can be done.
But you've dialed in an inflation.
Yes, there is an inflation. And the reason why that inflation is part of that is because in the past, school districts did not build in inflation. And so what would happen is they would go out for $800 a student, and then what would happen is the inflation would catch up, and it was a 10-year levy. But then in about 5 years, they found themselves in the same situation that they were in 5 years before, where they were not able to meet the inflationary costs and all the rising costs and the mandates. And so then they would have to revoke that referendum and try to go out for another one in 5 years. And so a lot of school districts now are going out for also to have that information or the inflation as part of that as well.
And inflation doesn't affect the taxpayers?
It does. Yes. Yes, yes, it does. I know.
Question about in the rural area where we don't necessarily know what the assessed valuation of our house, 1 acre and a garage is. Well, how do we gain information of that to know how it's going to affect us directly?
I believe you can go to a county website and be able to put in your address, and it would be able to tell you what that is. I will double check, and we'll get that on our website for people to look at. But I believe there is something you can put in your address, and it will tell you what the evaluation of your house would be for this referendum.
Okay, I'll double check that when I get home tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, and if it's not, I'll have our people take a look at that and try to get that up in the next few days.
Last week there was a school board meeting. As I understand, that was a different levy that was being discussed last week. Can you explain the two different levies?
Yes, so this one, every year, as you saw, that the state allows levies for many different areas. And so last week, and we can go out for those levies, and it has been going out for many years. And last week was just taking a look at what those levies would be. The state takes a look at our enrollment, takes a look at our property values, takes a look at a lot of things economically, and then we'll determine how much of the community will fund at that point. So, Julie, maybe you can, is there something you want to add to that?
And so The district has to levy that. And if they don't levy it, they also lose the state aid for it. And so that's why districts levy that. We do it every year, and it's really no different than the cities and counties. The difference between, excuse me?
Line B on my property tax, under District 531, I got a line A, which is the bonding bill. I got a line B, which
Yes.
I assume is
Other levies, yes. So on your tax report, you'll see two lines. One says voter approved for the school district. That's what you've approved for the bonds for your buildings. And the other one says other levies. And that's what the legislature requires us to levy for. So
And-
this is different than what you're asking for. This would be a voter approved levy. Cities and counties don't have to ask you. They can just levy. So school districts have to come to you to ask for more money. Cities and counties do not.
I already am paying more to the school district than I am to Olmsted County and my township. And you want to increase it some more. I have a question for you about the levy. If you could answer, please.
Yep.
I was at that meeting, and your recommendation, and I think all school districts do that, is to levy the maximum. Can you explain that process and why? I know it has to do with you lose state funding if you don't.
School districts are required by law, again, by September 30th to approve a preliminary levy. The state of Minnesota hasn't done all of their homework by the time we have to approve it. And so what it allows the state of Minnesota to do is to make adjustments to your levy for prior years. So, and that's what's so complicated. The school district's levy form is 39 pages long. So all of the different levies for prior years is all in there. So if we had fewer students than we anticipated, we get less money. For prior years, it goes through a whole calculation and does that. And so it allows for that to happen. And that's why we levy the maximum. So it allows for those adjustments to be made. For the most part, the levy won't change a whole lot unless they find a big error that they would have had to make, not the district.
And we will be having a truth and taxation meeting on December 16th. It's part of our board meeting on December 16th. So then that's when we'll present what those levies, what that will be moving forward for the 2025 taxes at that time. So.
Could you just comment this, I think it was the second chart you showed, so there was a big discrepancy between what we're currently funded and what, I forget the exact dimensions of the chart. It seems like we've been underfunded for many, many years. Why now, all of a sudden, is this a crisis where we have to talk in these terms?
Yeah, because I will tell you that the 5 years before last year, our insurance premiums were only going up 5%, single digits. Last year it was 28%. This year was 29%. Next year they're telling us it could be as much as 20%. And so that has been a big hit to us, as well as and like I said, we didn't see that coming right away until all of a sudden you get to that spot where you meet with them in the spring and said, here's what your next year's insurances are going to be like. And then also that funding, when it comes to those inflation areas, you feel it, we feel it. When it comes to snow removal, lawn care, paying our teachers, our staff members, all of our staff members district-wide, trying to be regionally competitive and so forth, those have gone up. You look at property, our own property and liability insurance, we have to have, which I don't have to have at my house, but we have to have here the cybersecurity insurance, and that's more. So we're having to take on a lot more of this, as well as some of these mandates that, like I said, if we wanted local control, then local control is, I showed you $80,000 for media and for support staff. You know, give us the $80,000 and let the school board and our school and our administrators and so forth decide where Byron needs that $80,000. That money comes in and we don't always have control where it has to go. And sometimes it's not even to supplant or use for somebody who's already there and say, we're going to pay for their salary now. It is, you'll get it if you add this position. So now we're having to add money, add people, for $40,000, but it probably cost us $70,000 to have them. But that's the only way we get that $40,000 in. So all of that is coming together. But in the past, I showed that we were increasing by 80 students, by 60 students, and then COVID happened, and then we were increasing so much we were looking at having to add on to support the kids that we were growing, and or that were coming in, and then all of a sudden now, this year, if you saw I didn't really look at or stress it enough, but from last October 1 to this October 1, we've gone up 12 kids. We've gone up 12 kids twice now in the last 2 to 4 years. Last year we went up by 25 or 30 kids. So it is starting to come to a head. I will tell you also that when we talk at the administrative level and we talk to other board members who've been around for a little bit, these conversations they were having in 2017 and 18. When should we go out for an operating levy? But we were adding 80 kids and 50 kids and doing that. And so that helped our revenue, as well as, okay, now in order to support this, now we have to go out and add to our schools. And so when you go out for an operating levy then, right? So I think it's always been on a conversation at certain levels in our district. It's just at this point now, we need to do this, otherwise we're gonna see our reserves go down, or we're going to have to make, they'll continue to go down if we don't continue to make reductions. And if we make reductions, we're not going to have the types of programs and the types of classes that people are expecting here in Byron. And we're just here to say, and we're expecting all these other things coming down the road that are going to hit us as well, these other mandates. So that's why we're doing it now, because in the past, there was a lot of things that happened that prevented them from going out at that point.
Okay. Can I follow up on the health insurance
Yes.
Premiums?
Mm-hmm.
Has the impact to the teachers and administrators been felt on that end too, or have they maintained the same level of insurance and the district itself has absorbed the 20% cost or the now 29% cost?
In most cases, for example, with directors and some principals and also teachers, we have absorbed that. The district does pay for a percentage of the teachers' pay, so we've had to pick that up and so forth. So,
what's the percentage?
We pay for 90% of the highest level of insurance for them. For
Okay.
teachers and for directors and like myself, we have a flat fee that we get, and so we've absorbed that 28% increase.
What's the overall benefit package increase for total compensation for teachers and administrators? And I understand that the wages on average might be slightly lower, but with that information, it would seem to me that the benefit run on that would be at least 30%, if not 35% above that wage.
I'm not quite sure at this time, and I don't know if Julie would know if you would have enough information, but we can make sure that we get that information out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. And there was a question down here, are we outliving our means? As we showed you before, we've done a lot in this school district, and we are still very cognizant of where we're at and what we want to keep. But as we're trying to show you is that because we are funding and because our enrollment isn't what it used to be, and because of those increases that we're facing coming up in those mandates, we will not be able to maintain the same level that we're at. We won't have that that same revenue coming in as we've had, or that same, and as we try to meet those challenges. The only way we can do that is if we start reducing. And if we start reducing, we're going to have to make reductions in areas that affect a lot with kids and families and what people become accustomed to for Byron education. And that's what we're trying to, we will still be very cognizant and very vigilant on our funding and making sure that this funding does meet our needs and also for years to come. So, but again, if we don't have this funding moving forward, that's why we're asking, is that we're gonna not be able to balance our budget, and we're gonna have to make some reductions. And at this point, we don't know exactly what the number of those reductions, but it will be significant at some point if we continue not to have an operating levy.
Sorry, I just have one more quick question, then I'll give it up. Is just to confirm, the district is not currently operating or incurring debt to make payroll and to cover all the expenses on a monthly basis?
Not at this point, no.
Okay, thank you.
No. Yes, right here. Yeah, for 23-24 budget or expenses have not been totally completed yet. Again, with the transition of 2 business directors, one thing that we wanted to do with Julie coming in, being very experienced, is have her go through those line items and using our business office to make sure that the numbers that were previously put out there were exactly the numbers that were true numbers. I can tell you that some of that, there are some discrepancies that we need to check through. We do have all the information into Region 5 to reconcile last school year. Once those are reconciled, everything's been put in, coded the right way, coded in the right spots, and they're going to be able to come back hopefully soon and be able to give Julie kind of, here's where FY23 or FY24 ended, and then she's already working on FY25 budget. That's this school year, 24-25. She's already working on that, but she can't fully do the budget until she figures out where we ended this past school year. So I know people are anxious for numbers. I'm anxious for numbers, but it's taken about a whole year's worth of work and trying to verify the numbers that were put in there over the course of 2 different business directors. So we want to make sure before we put anything out that it is validated and they are true numbers moving forward. Right now, our specific departments don't have a budget line item, but all of our approvals have to go through the principal and the business office in order to do that. So we are just getting essentials or buying what we would consider our leaders as essential purchases at this time, because we do need to fix things, and we do need supplies for classroom and so forth, but we're hoping to have that line item budgets in each of those areas very soon. Okay. Anything else?
First of all, somebody voted for my education, so I'm planning on voting yes for this one for the future of our economy.
Thank you.
But coming back to where we started at, is our district doing everything in its power to produce the revenue that's available to us?
Yes.
Okay. So with that question, I heard from a member of our public that there are multiple free money that we failed to apply for in the past couple of years, and Julie's working on trying to get that money back. Is there any gap stops in your leadership to make sure that people that are responsible for getting those grants do it in the future?
Yes, and not only under my leadership, but that's why we are also including having a budget committee, having other people besides our business manager be the ones to be able to look at those, or myself even, to be able to have other eyes and other people that would have experience in those and be able to look at our budgets on a monthly basis as well as a quarterly basis moving forward and be able to know. But like I said, school finance is pretty complicated, and we really do have to lean on the people that know school finance and then be able to ask questions as we move forward. That's why we have committees like the Finance and Facilities Committee. We have the Budget Committee moving forward, and so we have more eyes and more questions moving forward.
Okay, well, that's not the information that I got from the school board members, so. Another question is the district office building that you sit in, and I know it was bought through either bonding money or whatnot, but I was told that that's a building that's forever ours. Is that a sunset thing that if our district continues to shrink, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is, at that point in time we can offload that building or sell it? Or is that forever our asset that we're burdened with?
Nope, you can sell that building as soon as that bond is paid off. When that bond is paid off, and you could sell it now. The issue would be that the money that you would get from that sale would go back into pay back the taxpayers. It doesn't go into the general fund. And so if you sold it for $500,000 or $600,000, that you can't use that for the general fund. It would be a one-time payment back to the taxpayers. So depending on what the value of your house is, you might see a $50 to $100 for that year. The reason why it was bought in the first place is so that it would open up some space at this community ed center. Remember, that was a couple years ago when we were all expecting it to be growing. Also, the district office has been in many different spots throughout the district. When I got here, I was told every 5 years, pretty much, the district office moves. And so this came up, it was the old Zed building over on the frontage road. It came available. The school board met and said that they would like to have a more stable place for our community, for our directors to be able to be together at one instead of being spread out throughout the district. They also thought it would be a great place to have trainings at eventually. That's where, when we have smaller board meetings, we hold our board meetings there, our work sessions, our training sessions at that place, and it would be a place that would be consistent for the next several years. So again, if you sell it, it's not going into the general fund and be able to do that. It would go back to a one-time payment to the taxpayers and spread out through all the taxpayers. And then what would happen is it might save you $100 one year, but then the next year that $100 is added back on. And so, but that is something that's how that building works. And then once the bonding is paid off, then that building can be sold.
Thank you. Next question, actually my last question. With the earlier comment that you're doing everything in your power to produce the revenue that's available to us, are you done giving discounts to rental spaces and youth commissions and other stuff that are renting our facilities?
We have on our website which groups have to pay which levels. It depends on how many students are in that organization that are part, what percentage of their students are part of our community, and we have, it says in our handbook or according to our policy, which groups would get which range of pay or what level of pay. So, okay. All right, well, I will still be around. You have one more question, and then we will still have people around. You can come up and see us individually at that time. And again, we'll be meeting again on October 14th. If you have any questions, we do have our website, and there's an email on there that you could send emails to and ask questions, and we'll get those answers to you.
I have one more question. Thank you for the presentation. With the increase of the cost of the last couple of years for the insurance for the staff, the staff members, is there any consideration of looking at the insurance policies that they can go ahead and purchase? I know Mayo, when I used to work with them, they keep changing that. They went down to an 80-20. The current company that I have has a high deductible. They have 2 high deductible health plans and an 80-20. Is there consideration of looking at some other options for that? Because when you take some of those high deductible health plans, it kind of benefits both sides of that. So I'm just wondering if there's an option of looking at that.
And we have added those for people, for our staff, as well as to help us to have, we do have some high deductible plans. We've also have done something this year where with our insurance company that we have a virtual option. Right now, we went out for and asked bids for other insurance companies to see if we could get a better deal than the 28%. Because of the high claims that we have, and because of the number of claims that we have, and the revenue that we bring in compared to the money that we're spending, that's where you have to make up that difference. We had one company, the PEEP, the Public Employees Insurance Program. They're the only ones that gave us a bid back because of our situation, and they said, we'll take you, but it's a 50% increase. But going back to that virtual option, it is an option that we can use, our staff can use, who are part of our insurance, that can do things virtually, appointments, dermatology, mental health, some of those things, and it doesn't cost them. It doesn't cost them out of pocket, and it doesn't cost us anything out of pocket either as a school district. So that way, our people are getting the help they need. We're not having that claims. We're not being charged, and we'll be looking more attractive to other insurance companies moving forward. It will also help us look at that, but that's kind of a long answer to your question, but we are looking at, we work with National Insurance Services, they're a broker, and they're helping us look at as many different options as possible, including, those low deductible compared to high deductible. And our insurance, again, is contract, it's negotiated, and so forth, and all the negotiations will be coming up again this summer. They're on 2-year contracts, and so the 4 different groups that we meet with for contract negotiations will start this summer, and that's when we can start talking about some changes. Okay. All right. Again, I thank you for being here. We do have people here to ask questions if you have them, and the next meeting is on October 14th. But don't wait. We'll send you all the information. Keep checking our website. And again, thank you for being here. Have a great night, everyone.